very strict on time, so I will now put on my timer. And then I will just, first of all, thank you, Clara, and thank you to the Confederation of Danish Industries for co-organizing this and for moderating. And a particular thank you to the Asian Development Bank for reaching out. I think it's an important thing to know that this is actually an initiative that comes from you. The demand is there. So for all of our good colleagues out in the Danish companies that have the solutions, there is a demand, there is a will to work with Danish solutions and to source from the Danish strongholds. Today, we will have some time to learn more about which concrete projects, which concrete opportunities, which challenges is it that we face together. And we will also have a concrete example from Mr. Antti Inkinen, from the Director for Asia Pacific at Niras Consultants. Because we actually have good examples of Danish companies engaging with the Asian Development Bank in meeting these challenges. I have a couple of numbers here in front of me. To date, when we talk about goods, we have about 222 contracts worth of $340 million awarded. And for consultancy companies, 335 contracts worth $230 million. And I think it's also important to notice that there's a trend here, a quite important one, that last year alone, we had 27 contracts awarded around $80 million. So just to say, there is a demand, there's a trend, there is a match between the Danish solutions and the problems and the projects that the Asian Development Bank tries to address. Concrete examples that are here right now include wind power projects, where, for example, we have in India, the Philippines, and Vietnam, where Vestas is a significant contributor. From the Danish side, we continue to promote this. My government, of which I'm a representative, is a climate government. We have a 70% reduction target, as many of you know, but also global aspirations. Denmark cannot move this needle alone. Actually, Denmark is a very small country, so we won't move much of the needle alone. So we need to and want to engage globally. That's where we also come into play, and that's why I'm here today as well, just to put us at your disposal in making these things come together. The organization that I lead is about 550 export and innovation professionals around the world placed at the embassies. My colleagues stand ready to assist you in making the solutions and the challenges meet, also concretely when we talk about the Asian Development Bank projects. We have quite a broad portfolio of services that we can help you with, and we can be the connector, if you will, of different actors. We have our good colleagues, once again, from both the Asian Development Bank, also from the Confederation of Danish Industries here today, but we also have a lot of engagement with the financing mechanisms that are available to Danish companies. Many of you will know them already, but I will mention them, both the Export Credit Agency, in Danish EKF, as well as the Investment Fund for the Developing Countries, in Danish IFU. I won't go into the exact mechanics of how this works, but this is also something we can assist you with, both in advising you directly about which mechanisms could be relevant to leverage into projects, but also quite simply to make the connection. It's about people. This is a people business, and we actually have very many good colleagues, also some of them placed out in your region from the funding agencies. I'm really excited about this seminar personally. This is what we're here to do, to make the Danish solutions meet the global challenges, to help your bottom line out in the companies quite concretely, but also to help the Asian Development Bank meet its bottom line, and to help us all meet the triple bottom line that we work here in the Ministry of both growth and economic development, but also solving the climate challenges and assuring also that we have socially sustainable projects. So with that, then once again, just thank you for the opportunity. I really hope to hear from you. There will be contact information shared afterwards, so please do reach out and let us work together to make solutions and challenges meet. And with that, I hand it over to you, Clara, and once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Just on time. And thank you for kicking this event very good off. Just some practical information from a start. My name is Clara Halvorsen. I work as a senior advisor here at the Confederation of Danish Industries. And if you want to ask any questions during the sessions, please type them in the chat, and please only use the chat for that. I will also ask all of you to please mute yourself when you're not speaking in order for us to hear all of the speakers without any disturbing noise. And with that being said, I would like to give the word to our next speaker, Mr. Rustam Abdukayamo, who's the Director of Procurement, Division 2 of Procurement, Portfolio and Financial Management in ADB. And he oversees procurement and consultant service operations in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Pacific countries. Mr. Rustam, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Clara. Good morning, good day to all our participants, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this virtual business opportunity seminar. I know that we are conducting this virtually, but I hope starting from next year, we will be able to conduct it in person. And we are all looking forward to this kind of format because it's much more efficient, I think, for both sides. I would like to thank our host organizations, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Confederation of Danish Industries, for helping us in organizing these events. And I would also like to extend my thanks to Mr. David for your kind support and for opening this event. As you know, this is the third year ADB is conducting this business opportunity seminars virtually. But it has generated quite a big interest from business communities. In 2020, we conducted 34 BOSs. In 2021, we have conducted 54 BOSs in different countries, and still there is quite a big interest. We continuously receive requests from different constituencies to continue with this format, and we have few events this year. What we are trying to achieve is first to maintain our dialogue with the business community. And we know that today we have representatives from consulting industry, and there are quite few Danish companies who are quite actively engaged in ADB operations, in project preparation and in project implementation. I hope there are some contractors and suppliers who are also either working with ADB or are interested to work with ADB. And I would like to share some figures so that we know what we are talking about. If we talk about consulting services, ADB provides about $200 million consulting services that are administered by ADB itself. It means where ADB recruits consultants and manages these contracts. So that comprises of about 3,000 contracts with individual consultants and about 250 contracts with firms. So there are quite a lot of opportunities in this area. But in addition, as many of you are aware, there are many consulting opportunities under grants and loans, which are managed by our borrowers. But, just for comparison, in 2021, ADB borrowers have spent about 700 million on consulting services compared with the 200 that ADB spends. And there is continuous kind of interest in engaging with the quality consulting firms. And this is not only in the traditional area of project preparation feasibility studies, but we notice that projects become more and more complex, and there is a need for more specific expertise. But there could be different areas of expertise which traditionally we did not see, so maybe 10 years ago. But now there are more and more kind of needs to engage with the consultants who are familiar with the IT sphere, with the modeling, financial modeling, some other tools that could be used to ensure better project preparation. There is a big demand for consultants who prepare different surveys for infrastructure projects like topographic surveys, geotechnical surveys, and those who are involved in the detailed design preparation. So therefore, there is ample opportunity for different consulting industries to participate in ADB projects. But apart from that, of course, there are always opportunities for suppliers of goods and also large contractors to implement civil work contracts. So we see quite a big interest from our borrowers, not only in traditional work contracts, which are based on the employer's design, but also in many countries, they shift to design and build approaches, or sometimes to design, build, and operate approaches where contractors have single responsibility from designing to construction and operation of facility. And so therefore, I hope you will be interested to explore our opportunities with the ADB in these areas. Today, we will be focusing actually on quite interesting topics. One is circular economy, relatively new for many of us, but then also we'll focus more on traditional water and energy sectors, which are quite large in ADB portfolio and where there are many opportunities. And we will also cover ADB's procurement policy, processes, and opportunities, and how to find such opportunities on the ADB website. So the life goes on, and of course, we value very much our cooperation with the business communities around the world, because we need these business communities, experts like you, to help us prepare projects, to help us implement projects, to help us to promote new ideas, innovations, new technologies, so that we improve our performance. And therefore, I hope we will maintain our close cooperation. You will find some useful information from today's seminar, and hopefully you will be able to have a direct benefit from that, and maybe you will get contracts awarded under ADB projects. So I'm wishing you a successful seminar, and would like to thank you all for your participation, and we'll hand over back to Clara. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rustam. Just practical information. We would like all of you to rename yourself for an easier identification. So if you could rename your display name to include your company and organization, it would make it much easier for both me and the other organizers. Moving on in the program, I'm very happy to welcome Mr. James Baker, who's the Senior Circular Economy Specialist for Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department in ADB. James, as time is running, I'll just hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Clara. Let me see if we can share my screen so that you can see the presentation. There we go. So good morning, everybody. As Rustam mentioned, circular economy is a new concept, a new idea for a lot of us. I want to explain to you this morning how ADB is looking at circular economy, how we're approaching it, and how that is turning into business opportunities. And I do take this opportunity to say that the very early days of our circular economy was supported by Danish consultants. So it's we've learned a lot from Denmark, from your experience, and that's sort of formed our vision of circular economy moving forward. So let's have a look. So we're seeing circular economy more than just recycling, more than just plastic bottles. We're looking at circular economy as a systems approach. We're trying to use it as a framework to integrate and cut across traditional silos, traditional sectors, and support us both in working with our developing member countries to achieve sustainable development goals, net zero 2050, but also ADB's own strategy for 2030 of prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia. And we see that circular economy provides us with that framework to begin looking at how we can work between different sectors, how we can begin to form that circularity, and also how we can get sectors working together so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And as we interact with consultancies, as we interact with expert engineers, we're beginning to look at that cross-functional, cross-sector approach, the understanding and seeing how we can use traditional ideas from each individual area to form together into more effective solutions. So we see that there are entry points across ADB's activity, obviously anchored in our sectors, focused on climate change and the environment. But we're starting to see energy projects that are, rather than just talking about climate change, but are heavily integrated with that. They're looking at nature-based solutions for carbon absorption. We're looking at urban development opportunities which integrate nature-based solutions, which integrate community-based activities, make them friendly environments, using nature to support cooling, using nature, using water conservation to make the urban environments more sustainable. We're looking at opportunities for gender accessible quality jobs, how we can use technology to link women in the community, women in industry, to give them a larger portion, particularly when we look at the plastics treaty and how we begin to record plastic recycling, how we begin to record plastic collection. So we're starting to see, rather than individual silos, much longer chains, much larger circularity in how we address this. And as the business opportunities come up, you're going to see more complex, and Rustam mentioned this, more complex projects rather than the traditional engineering, the traditional pre-feasibility. We're looking for that ability to think across silos, across boundaries, begin to form these new and innovative ways of approaching problems that we know are there, but perhaps haven't been able to address in quite such a holistic approach. And that's where the business opportunities are coming up, and certainly where I'm beginning to see contracts coming through ADB systems for consultancy, for goods and engineering approaches, to look at how we achieve this and support us in doing that. And we recognize that there is a lot of knowledge in Denmark, in your consultancies, in your expertise to help us achieve that. And one of the interesting things we begin to see is that circular economy for ADB, traditionally, people are looking at circular economy as a circle, but the reality for it for a development bank is that it becomes a helical screw, so that a single project today might not be fully circular, but as we move through time and other projects come into play, then the circularity develops. And it may be only in 3, 4, 5 years' time, when 3 or 4 projects interlink, that we get full circularity. But it's that process of thinking about it today to make sure that individual projects are prepared, are set up, have the capability to integrate into the future and achieve this level of circularity as we move through time. And we begin to look also at programmatic approaches. So we have situations for myself where I run the marine plastic pollution technical assistance program, where that is being extended beyond the marine plastics into upstream plastic activities, into agriculture. We're seeing sovereign projects, we're seeing technical assistance projects and private sector projects integrating to get that circularity. We're seeing opportunities coming from individual projects or individual groups of projects, and we're beginning to build frameworks where we look to the next step, where we look outside the traditional. Where else can we add value? Where else can we bring expertise to bear so that a single project entry point becomes a much bigger program and delivers much bigger sustainability, environmental, social, economic benefits? And we have several examples of this. So we have marine plastics, we have agricultural plastics working in the Yangtze River Basin. Very interesting opportunity. 4 or 5 projects coming together, integrating with, and we're working together with our consultants, with our contractors to make sure those integrations work. So as we start to look for business solutions, we're looking for that expertise, for that knowledge, for that innovation of how we can link projects that typically would have been isolated or individual projects. And goes into health and cities as well. So we're not just looking at plastics, we're not just looking at environment, we're looking at the entire of ADB's activities, where we can use circularity, where we can bring together this integration, this programmatic approach to help us develop pipelines, and to help us have pathways into the future that achieve, maintain, and develop that sustainability. So it's also an interesting opportunity for us. We're looking at it from the systems dynamics point of view, and Rustam mentioned modeling. One of the aspects we're looking at is essentially as we switch from a linear approach to a circular approach, we're destabilizing mature markets and understanding how that destabilization, that individual step from non-sustainable to sustainable activities can have emergent phenomena, can cause systems failure. And obviously as a development bank, what we're looking for is to understand at what point in the future a policy decision or at what point in the future a development decision may have unexpected negative impacts. We look to model that, and we look to put in place mitigation, or at least prepare and work with our developing member governments to prepare for possible negative outcomes, to understand them, avoid them, or mitigate them. We start to play with the ideas of complex value. We start to look at the trade-offs we're going to have to make as we bring environmental value into traditional economic models. So financial, economic, social is going to have to suffer a little bit to allow environmental concerns to be integrated into projects, sustainability to be integrated into projects. How do we manage that balance? How do we manage that trade-off? So that experience, that ability to model, that ability to look into the future and say, okay, we understand what's going to happen. We think this was what will happen next. And that allows us to prepare for that future and mitigate anything negative that may come out of that. So we start to look at specific examples of business opportunities. Part of my job looking at plastics is preparing for the plastics treaty. So we're beginning to look at the foundation stones for the global plastics treaty. How can we better measure collection? How can we better measure recycling? I'm not sure if plastic credits will be the financial solution, but whatever the financing mechanism that is attached to the global plastics treaty, we're going to have a way to measure the collection, measure the recycling, and track the flow of those plastics through the circular economy to prevent double counting, to give that level of transparency and robustness to the system, which will then allow our countries to take advantage of financing mechanisms, take advantage of crediting systems, both in terms of plastics management, but also as a way for developing jobs, the value of those plastic credits flowing down into communities. So this is an interesting one in Vietnam, and we've had a lot of very positive feedback from Vietnam about circular economy, and it's growing. We launched our circular economy working group yesterday, and we're seeing circular economy questions coming from a lot of governments, coming from a lot of operational teams. How do we integrate this? What does it mean? So this level of preparation, innovation for the future is something we're increasingly looking for from our consultants, thinking outside the box. And we recognize that this is complex. We recognize this is different. We're very happy to work with suppliers, with consultancies to overcome those challenges, particularly in the bidding process. I had a conversation with some of our colleagues yesterday about that complexity and how they can deal with that in the future. And there are options. We recognize that these are challenges. So do feel free to engage with ADB, talk to us about how the world is going to look in the future and how your bidding process, your involvement can work with us and we can work with you. We're also starting to see social inclusivity as a big part of this, and ADB has always been a bank for the community, a bank for poverty alleviation. When we start to see Circular Business Hub, and this was actually created by a very skilled Danish consultant who worked with us last year and this year to come up with this Circular Business Hub. It's an example from Denmark, and it's one that we've transferred to Indonesia and several of our other countries to look at how we collect together information, how we interact with all levels of government, community, academia, science, bring that together. Collaborative forums, you see there is a Danish concept, is an idea that came from Denmark. So there's a lot of value coming from Denmark, coming from the Nordic countries, your experience that we can readily use, we can readily integrate into what we're doing in Asia. So the message
you will
is
have
there's
to conclude now, James. I'm sorry, because time is running.
Quickly. And I'm just going to say thank you. This is the last slide. So we do value the knowledge you have. We're excited to work with you. There's a lot you can bring to the table. Engage with us, work with us. Let's learn how to do this together. I'm done. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you very much, James. I just promised to
you.
be very strict on timekeeping. I was just informed that you unfortunately have to leave us very soon, and therefore I will make room for if there's just one question for James before we're moving on to the next speaker. And otherwise, James, I was informed that you will answer the questions coming up in the Q&A session on email after the session, if there's any questions there. But if anyone have a very quick question for James, please type it in the chat, or otherwise we will move on to our next speaker. I'll just give it 10 seconds to see if anything pops up here. It doesn't seem like it. James, then I will forward any questions to you on email and then make sure that replies will be sent back to those asking. Now, please, if you're not speaking, I'll have to ask you to mute yourself in order to hear all of our speakers. Because now moving from circular economy into water, I would like to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Christian Walder, who's a water supply and sanitation specialist in the water sector group of ADB's Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. Christian, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Clara, and very good afternoon from Manila. It's my great pleasure to be with you today and to talk about some of the interesting things that the Asian Development Bank is doing in the water sector. The next 15 minutes, I have divided the presentation into 3 big blocks. First, I would like to outline some of the water challenge that we are particularly facing in the Asia and the Pacific region. Then also explaining ADB's vision to address those challenges. And this is also the area where we need your inputs, where we need your support, where we need your expertise in order to develop those sustainable solutions when we implement our projects and programs. And the third building block will be a quick overview about our water sector portfolio, so that you have an idea in terms of the numbers, how much we are investing per year into the water sector. So starting off with the next slide, I don't know if you're familiar with one of our key flagship publications, which is the Asian Water Development Outlook. We have published a series of those documents, of those knowledge products, the latest one in December 2020. And basically it gives an overview of the National Water Security Index of all ADB developing member countries. There is a comprehensive assessment. You see it on the top right by using different key dimensions, for example, rural water household security, urban water security, economic water security, and environmental water security. Nevertheless, I would like to draw your attention onto the map, and I would like to highlight 3 points which I think are really interesting. You see in the bottom left, basically the rating, starting with nascent, which is the lowest score in terms of the national water security. And then you see the number 5, which is the model stage, which would be the highest scoring of national water security. And let me emphasize those points. On the one hand, there is only one country which is in the nascent stage, which is namely Afghanistan. It's a little bit small maybe, but it's located in our central and west region. So there is a long way to address the water challenges in Afghanistan. The second point I would like to highlight is that there is no country, even not the developed economies in our region, who have yet reached the model stage. There are some of them in the effective stage, namely Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, but no country has still reached the model stage. And the third point I would like to emphasize are the yellow dots, the number 2s, in terms of the engaged national water security, where many countries in South Asia, Southeast Asia, but particularly also in the Pacific, are rated at this stage. And this means for them, there is still a long way to go to improve their water security and to provide sustainable and resilient water services to people living in those particular areas. And the Asian Development Bank is helping those developing member countries to address those challenges. You all might be familiar with the challenges you see here on this slide, so there is no need for me to talk in detail about those points. Obviously, climate change is being primarily felt through water. Food security depends on water security. When we imagine the recent incidents that happened in Pakistan over the last couple of days, it's just very hard to imagine what consequences this will have on the food security of an entire country of more than 200 million people living there. So these are huge, huge challenges that really require resilient, sustainable, and innovative solutions. And for this, we need your support. Inadequate access to basic water supply sanitation services, still a big topic. We are off track in achieving SDG 6, as you all might know. Wetland destruction is driving biodiversity loss. Water quality is deteriorating. For example, with 80% of urban wastewater is discharged untreated into the environment. So these are some of the key challenges we are facing in the region. And this goes together with poor governance systems, and which you see on this slide, low financial sustainability, low uptake of digital solutions, and weak human and institutional capacity. I think it's clear to all of us when talking about the water sector, when investment in the water sector, we need to take an integrated perspective. It's not sufficient to build and to finance the assets only. We also need to think about the sustainability of the investments, about the institutional environment, about the policy environment, the regulatory environment. Really have this integrated perspective in order to make projects and investments sustainable. And you see that governments, institutional capacity, financial sustainability, the willingness to charge, for example, for water supply and sanitation tariffs. These are some of the key challenges we are facing in our region. But we also have a vision in ADB. So based on our strategy 2030 and our sector directional guideline, which will be published very soon, it's currently on our web page for public consultation. So if you have time, please feel free to have a look into this into the draft version. But basically, you see the 5 elements, the 5 pillars, the 5 guiding principles that will lead our water investments in the next years until 2030. Improving governance and catalyzing finances, promoting inclusiveness and gender equality, building resilience and adaptive capacity, fostering innovation and technological advancement, and embracing environmental sustainability and circular economy, as James just has mentioned before. Obviously, there is a close interlinkage of water and the different other sectors, and we are closely working together with colleagues from across the bank. Basically, in the next slide, you see how we are particularly translating those challenges into our projects. We are mainstreaming and expanding climate adaptation in projects and policies. There has been a huge commitment by the Asian Development Bank to increase climate adaptation and climate mitigation financing until 2030, strengthening the enabling environment and avail modalities and tools. For example, I'm just mentioning different lending modalities, but also digitalization and technological innovation. Obviously, we have to think how we can also leapfrog, how we can learn from other countries, how we can apply the tools and technologies into our context to make the sanitation sector more sustainable, more inclusive, and more resilient. Conducting upstream sector diagnosis. This really is related to the topic understanding what are the challenges that a particular country is facing. As I said, one of these assessment tools is the Asian Water Development Outlook. But going into more details, it's important to have the understanding what are the challenges. And obviously, as you can imagine, within the Asian Development Bank, there is a huge diversity in terms of the challenges, for example, a country in our Central West region is facing compared to a small island country in the Pacific. And we have to understand the local context. We have to address those challenges. And again, for this understanding, we heavily rely on consulting services and other expertise that is coming into ADB. In the next couple of slides, I would like to give you a snapshot of ADB's water sector portfolio. I think it's quite interesting to know, on the one hand, the current portfolio, but also where the Asian Development Bank investments are heading. So here you see an overview of the entire water sector portfolio between 2011 and 2021, which is around 26 billion and directly supporting water security and resilience for at least 649 million people in the region. Obviously, what you see here, that still a majority, more than 50% of our investments are related to water supply, sanitation, and wastewater management, with 13.7 billion here in this graph. Nevertheless, we see a shift in recent years that this portion is reducing slightly, and that the other subsectors, which you see on the left, irrigation, agricultural drainage, flood management, water-based natural resource management, and hydropower are increasing. So water supply, sanitation, wastewater, still one of the key sectors in ADB. Nevertheless, the other sectors are becoming more important. And Danish companies, they have a huge expertise, particularly, I think, in all of the subsectors, which I mentioned here. And we're also working successfully with Danish companies, as it has been mentioned by David earlier today. With this slide, I would like to emphasize the importance of climate finance, and also, as I mentioned, the diversification of the portfolio. It's a little bit small again, but you see on the top left graph that the financing for climate adaptation and mitigation significantly increased in recent years. So here at the comparison 2020-21, and also in the bottom left graph, you see that the green portion, which is basically related to water supply sanitation, is gradually reducing, and other sectors are becoming more prominent in terms of the portfolio that we are having. The graphs on the right, this gives an overview about important topics that are key to the Asian Development Bank, such as gender mainstreaming, private sector participation, and increasing the digitalization. There is no need to go into detail into all those numbers, but just to give you an idea that we are working hard to promote innovation, to promote digitalization in our projects and programs. Nevertheless, we have to adapt it to the local context. We have to always keep in mind the sustainability, and then you have to understand the local absorption capacity when developing digital solutions. The next slide, this shows you again our water sector portfolio, but this time now split it according to the different regional departments. Maybe you are familiar with ADB's organizational structure. We have 5 regional departments and the private sector operations department. And you see here those 5 regional departments, namely South Asia, Southeast Asia, Central and West Asia, East Asia, and the Pacific. And you also see private sector operations. So you see the biggest part of water investments still is with our South Asia regional department, but there are significant projects and financial flows also in Southeast Asia and Central and West Asia, and also obviously East Asia. So if you have any expertise, if you have a regional prioritization, I think it's important to understand where also the priorities of ADB are lying in the water sector. And obviously, you can find those details on ADB website, but for example, South Asia includes a number of countries in that region, namely India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Maldives, and others. There is always a set of countries included in the regional departments, but just that you get an overview about the share of our water sector portfolio and the regional breakdown. In terms of the annual lending history and the pipeline, you see again one graph by subsector. The next graph will be by regional department. You see roughly an estimated 2.3 until 3.2 billion of investments in the water sector per year. This has been quite constant over the last years since 2013, with some peaks in 2018. And obviously we see also, because of COVID-19, an increased demand of our water sector portfolio in the next couple of years. So we expect this number of 3.2 billion still to increase in the next coming years. And again, this is being reflected. You see water supply, sanitation, wastewater as the biggest part. Nevertheless, flood risk management significantly increasing, particularly when you have a look into the proposed pipeline in 2022.
Christian, I give you one more minute, then you have
That's
to wrap up, unfortunately.
I am already done. I'm already done. So this is an overview again by our operations compared to our regional departments. You can have a look into the details later, again, with the majority of investments going to South Asia. And I think this was already my last slide. I think there is no need to repeat this again. Basically, what I can offer, if you have any questions, there is always the opportunity to reach out, to get in touch directly. As it has been mentioned before, we need innovative solutions. We need your expertise. We have big challenges ahead of us in the water sector, and we are keen to learn from you and to work together from you with the goal to make Asian Pacific region more water secure and resilient. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian, and sorry to cut you off, but we have such an interesting program today and a lot of speakers. And please, everyone, if you have any questions for Christian, type them in the chat, and then we will follow up during the Q&A session. Now it's my pleasure to welcome our next speaker, taking us into the topic of energy, David Morgado, Senior Energy Specialist with the ADB. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Clara, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today, especially as I've worked with the Danish government on energy efficiency in emerging economies in the past, as well as with several Danish companies on heating and energy efficiency. So it's a real pleasure to be here and looking forward to the discussions and hopefully meeting many of you with the Danish delegation on the 6th of September. So I'll be taking you through a bit of the key energy challenges in Asia and the Pacific, which is the region that ADB covers, so what opportunities and the changing energy landscape that we see, and then sort of talking a bit about the ADB's energy portfolio over the last 10 years, looking at it in the past year and some of the challenges we've been facing with the portfolio, and hopefully an area where we can collaborate, and giving you some examples of the ADB's sort of clean energy projects that we've been doing. And if we have time, I can just give you a broad overview of the clean energy projects that we're looking for in 2021 to 2023. So as many of you know, here in the Asia Pacific region, we have a number of challenges. The first one being energy access. We still have a number of people, 350 million people without adequate supply. And if we look at 24/7 electricity, that number increases substantially. And 150 million people that still have no access to electricity, although that's being better addressed. But now with COVID-19 and the energy crisis, many people today cannot afford their energy services anymore. So we're seeing an increase in that number. Clean cooking and access to clean cooking is a big issue. So still very limited progress here in the region. And so very far from the Sustainable Development Goal 7 by 2030 that we're supposed to address this issue in terms of clean access to clean cooking. In terms of energy security, now it's a top issue at the moment. So of course, we see from the international energy agencies, there's a doubling of electricity demand in the region by 2040. So this is the region that will see substantial increase in energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions as well. The renewable energy investments projected by the IEA is of 1.3 trillion annually by 2030 in the region. And we see also substantial investment needs in energy efficiency. Of course, a big challenge in environmental sustainability, still 50% of global CO2 emissions from fossil fuels here from the region alone, approximately 25 of those from coal power generation. So what ADB's president typically states is the battle against climate change will be won or lost in Asia and the Pacific. And here we are very much looking working with Danish companies to address these challenges. But of course, there's a number of opportunities, as many of you know, falling cost of renewable energies. There's new and innovative low carbon energy technologies coming in, and I think here we can work very closely with Danish companies on offshore wind, of course, onshore wind, energy efficiency, district heating, district cooling, and many others. Global commitments, so we're seeing the Sustainable Development Goal 7 and the Paris Agreement. So there's changes definitely happening and triggering government action. And then finally, ADB's strong commitment to be the Asia and the Pacific Climate Bank. So we have raised our ambition on climate finance by 2030. And so again, we're looking very much to work with you to be able to realize this very ambitious target. And so that we have as many projects as we can in terms of covering climate mitigation and adaptation by 2030. Just to give you an overview in terms of our lending over the last 10 years, so on average, 20% of the ADB's lending is in the energy sector. Then when you split that in terms of clean energy and T&D, so sort of an even split between both. And if we look at clean energy, within that, renewable energy, energy efficiency, but also fuel switching. Particularly on energy efficiency is an area where we want to do more. Renewable energy, we've seen an increase in uptake in the last couple of years. This is similar to the water sector. We've got here a breakdown over the last 10 years of our investments by region, and you can see it fluctuates quite a lot, but typically South Asia is one of our markets where we're most active, and of course the private sector operations. We're seeing a lot of activity recently in Central and West Asia, particularly on the heating side and decarbonization. I think this is an area where Danish expertise can really help us a lot in your experience in decarbonizing your heating sector. Just looking at the last year, it wasn't our best year for a number of reasons, but particularly COVID-19 and a lot of delays in project approvals. So we did about 1.7 billion in energy sector lending across 19 energy projects. We typically do around 4 billion. And so there's the breakdown in terms of that number in terms of climate finance. Again, we really want to do much more, and hopefully we get that number to be closer to 80–90%. The ADB's energy policies is something that I'd like to highlight. It was introduced in September last year. It's a milestone energy policy because the last one was from 2009. So a number of changes. So again, we're prioritizing energy efficiency, renewable energy, also new technologies such as energy storage, and also looking at expansion and upgrade of electricity transmission and distribution. We support, as always, energy policy reforms, long-term planning, regional cooperation, and also try to ensure greater private sector participation, as this is the amount of investment that's required in the energy transition is going to be substantial and cannot be done by governments and ADB alone. We're looking at promoting smart, digital, innovative, and best available technologies, and we want to support countries in their just transition. Again, something that Denmark can help us with as you've sort of decarbonized and moved away from coal, and trying to see how that was done. And I think that the sharing of that experience would be very, very valuable, particularly with Dong, the utility, the Danish utility. We formally close the door for coal financing, but we leave the door open for natural gas under very strict criteria. We're selective on our financing of storage hydropower plants, and we don't do any financing of nuclear energy. In terms of principles, we have 5 principles under the energy policy. I would like to highlight the three main ones in the next slide. We have principle 1, which is securing energy for a prosperous and inclusive Asia and the Pacific. And that covers a number of areas, sort of all linked to the slides where I showed you the challenges and opportunity. Of course, continuing to support energy access through electrification, promoting cleaner cooking, heating, and cooling, and an area where I think Denmark can help us. Improving energy efficiency, of course, and then promoting social inclusion, gender equality, and partnerships. Principle 2, building a sustainable and resilient energy future. So again, a big focus on renewable energy, decarbonization, but also making a more resilient and efficient electricity infrastructure. Again, a big focus on just transition in the region as people have to move to new jobs if we're to achieve our climate goals. Principle 3, supporting institutions, private sector participation, and good governance. And here again, an area where we could work with Denmark, building on the experience from the Danish Energy Agency, for example. So supporting institutions, tariff and subsidy reform, private sector participation, sector-wide long-term planning, again, an area where Denmark has a lot of experience, and we've seen some work from the Danish Energy Agency in Indonesia, Vietnam, and other countries. And then finally, partnering to shape energy sector policies. In this slide, I'd like to highlight some of the clean energy projects that we have been doing. Financial intermediation loan is one example where we provided a credit line through the government to several local banks for financing of rooftop solar PV systems in Sri Lanka. It's been so successful that we're looking at a second credit line. We've also had a substantial project in energy efficiency, demand side efficiency in India with Energy Efficiency Services Limited, and where we've looked at energy efficiency in street lighting and a number of other areas, but also electric vehicles. Private sector loans we offer. We've done an interesting project in wind in Thailand, which included also battery energy storage project, and that was ADB provided long-term financing of $240 million. We're also looking at developing a battery storage project in Mongolia. And so this is the first energy storage project in the country. And then finally, a project we're looking in the Pacific, which is to look at installing climate resilient solar power capacity in a water reserve. So this would be floating solar. We also have ASEAN Catalytic Green Financing Facility, where we're trying to help governments with technical assistance and bring in co-financing partners. And so this could be of interest to Denmark. We're trying to look for co-financing donors to support us on these projects. And we did a recent project where we supported Cambodia through this ACGF for a 100 megawatt solar park. I'd like to highlight the Energy Transition Mechanism, which is a sort of flagship initiative from the ADB, where we're partnering with them to develop a market-based approach to retire coal power assets on an early schedule, and with that, replace it with renewable energy capacity. And again, this is an experience that Denmark would be quite valuable in terms of sharing with us their experience in closing down some of their coal power plants and how that was achieved, again, through the Dong Energy Company at the time, the utility. The objectives of DTM is obvious, of course: accelerate climate action, help reduce energy costs by investing in renewable energy, trying to drive investments, so trying to find a structure to crowd in and bring in private sector investors, and also to try to look at developing this model so that it can be utilized in different countries. So at the moment, we're looking at it in Philippines, Indonesia, and also Vietnam, but possibly other countries in Asia. If we still have a bit of time, Clara, I can just, we've got 1 minute.
I can give you 1 more minute,
Yes.
and then you have to wrap up.
Thank you, Clara. So just to give, these are my final slides, just to give you a sort of overview of the range of projects we're doing. Indonesia, looking at geothermal, but also electric buses, with Mongolia, smart grid systems, but also renewable energy projects, and Samoa, multi-purpose dam, which include hydropower, but also many other projects. Energy efficiency, again, you're not seeing that many, but it's an area where we definitely like to do more, and so collaboration would be great with Danish companies to explore how we can support Danish companies who are coming in to the Asia Pacific region and developing projects, and how we can scale up those up across the region. So with that, I'll stop here. So looking forward again to meeting many of you on the 6th of September, and looking forward to the discussions today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, David, also for giving some very concrete examples. And David will stay for the Q&A session. So if there's anything you would like to have elaborated, or if you have any questions for David, just remember to type them in the chat either now or during the Q&A session. Now we're moving into the next part of this seminar, focusing on doing business with ADB and the ADB procurement system. And to give us an introduction to that, and to give us an update from ADB on procurement processes and systems, I am very happy to welcome Mrs. Galia Ismakova, who's a principal procurement specialist with the ADB. Ms. Galia, very welcome, looking much forward to hear your presentation.
Thank you very much, Clara. Good morning, participants. I'm Principal Procurement Specialist with Procurement, Portfolio and Financial Management Department of ADB. So we are the department that looks after the policy and implementation of our procurement policy. So I will try to be reasonably fast, but I'm covering quite a lot of stuff that I think you need to know. First of all, ADB consists of 68 member countries, and this is important in view of eligibility criteria if you are setting up the bid for ADB and for ADB borrowers. ADB offers a range of financial products that helps developing member countries build economic growth and social development, and these tools include loans, grants, technical assistance. So under technical assistance, ADB primarily becomes a client, and under loans and grants, it is developing member countries who are the clients. Public sector or sovereign financing is extended to DMC, so developing member countries, governments, and public sector entities, including state-owned enterprises, and sovereign lending or financing secured by the government guarantee, which forms a greater part of ADB development assistance. However, we also have a public sector, private sector financing as well. So ADB's vision is Asia and Pacific being prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. We have guiding principles, including using country-focused approach, promoting innovation, providing integrated solutions through value additions of finance, plus, and plus here are knowledge and partnerships. So we have 7 operational priorities, and this is addressing remaining poverty and reducing inequalities, accelerating progress in gender equality, tackling climate change, making cities more livable, promoting rural development and food security, strengthening governance and institutional capacity, and fostering regional cooperation and integration. So we finance our projects mostly through funds that we have ourselves, but we also have co-financing partners that are other multilaterals, bilaterals, and sometimes private institutions. So what you need to know that ADB actually requires consultants, contractors, and suppliers at almost every stage of ADB project cycle, which starts from country partnership strategy or regional cooperation strategy. These are the documents where you can find the pipeline of sovereign portfolio. after we define together with the government country partnership strategy or regional cooperation strategy, we then move to the preparation of these investment projects. And this preparation of investment projects takes place as something we call TRTA, which is transactional technical assistance, or PRFs, project readiness financing, which is implemented by the developing member governments. Only at the level of approval of the project, where we prepare documents for the board, we do not actually require consultants or external parties. Once the project is approved, our borrowers move to implementation, where they require consultants, contractors, and suppliers, and also service providers to actually implement the project. At completion, we evaluate the projects, and 25% of our projects go through post-evaluation, where we learn the lessons learned, which actually goes back into the new project cycle of ADB. So you can find country partnership strategies at ADB website. And if you will learn anything from my presentation today, it is about using ADB website, because you can find almost anything that we do and almost any information that you require through going to ADB website. So why would you need to do it? For example, if you as a Danish company are already present in one of the countries in Asia and Pacific and want to involve with ADB or ADB funded projects, you can actually check the country partnership strategy for this country. Majority of the countries actually covered by country partnership strategies. The exception is 10 small Pacific countries that are covered by the Pacific approach. So in these documents, we have country partnership strategies that are created for a period normally of 3 to 5 years. And we also have an update to country partnership strategies called country operations business plans. Country operations business plans is a rolling plan which shows how we are actually fine-tuning this strategic partnership plan with the governments. We have, this is how you find about projects. Now, because I'm a procurement person, I need to tell you how you actually deal with us. How do you navigate yourself through the myriads of policies, procedures, guidances, regulations, etc. So ADB procurement framework consists of ADB procurement policy, which we call the policy, procurement regulations for ADB borrowers, staff instructions, and associated guidance notes. I'm not going to read the slide. I'm pretty sure you are capable of doing it yourself. And I'm sure that our colleagues in Denmark will share this presentation with you. So what I also need to tell you is that ADB procurement policy is practically a toddler. So we are only 5 years old. And prior to 2017, when ADB procurement policy was adopted by the board, we had two other sets of documents which were called ADB procurement guidelines and guidelines on use of consultants by ADB and its borrowers. So because our projects on average are implemented within 7 to 8 year period, we have some projects that still use the previous guidelines and some projects that are already moved to the policy. However, if you are very scared, please don't be scared, because ADB procurement policy have taken everything that was actually very good in procurement guidelines and moved it to procurement policy, adding some flexible approaches along the way. So core procurement principles of ADB procurement policies are economy, efficiency, fairness, transparency, quality, and value for money, where price alone may not sufficiently represent value for money. So we sound pretty much the same as any other IFI. However, we have one very big difference. And one very big difference in our procurement principles is that quality is now a core procurement principle in all our procurement. Previously, it was a core procurement principle only for the procurement of consulting services. So we also look at a fitness for purpose that requires procurement arrangements to appropriately reflect strategic needs and circumstances of the situation. Why it is so? Previously, when we were using a one-size-fits-all, we would be looking at the same procedures for People's Republic of China and for Tuvalu. And obviously, People's Republics of China and Tuvalu have very different backgrounds and very different market situation and very different economies. So obviously, we need to look at circumstances of the borrower and also look at how we can actually meet project outcomes and development objectives. So previously, I was telling you that ADB is owned by 68 member countries, and Denmark, luckily for you, is one of these members. So what it means is that in order to actually qualify and be eligible to supply goods, works, and services, you need to be from ADB member countries, unless this project is specifically have a waiver or is co-financed with another institutions where universal procurement applies. So when it will be the case? It will be the case, for example, in situations when we have co-financing with Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank or with World Bank. Okay, so we also look at alternative procurement arrangements where we can agree to apply the procurement rules and procedures of another multilateral or bilateral agency, and may agree that this party will take a leading role. So why it is important? In countries, specifically in Pacific, we have one package that may be actually funded by 4 different sources. And if we apply 4 different sets of procedure to one procurement package, it becomes very cumbersome to actually approve any procurement. In this case, alternative procurement arrangements is the way to go. So we have practically the same type of procurement methods and arrangements as any other IFI, such as open competitive bidding, limited competitive bidding, framework agreements, requests for quotations, previously known as shopping, electronic reverse auctions, direct contracting, and force accounts. We have particular types of procurement arrangements which refer to selection of consulting firms and individual consultants, and also procurement from specialized agencies such as UN, etc. So what you need to know is that while ADB sets up the policy, the responsibility is actually with the borrower. The borrower is legally responsible and accountable for the procurement. It invites, receives, evaluates bids, and awards the contracts. ADB is not a party of the contract, and it cannot be actually brought to any kind of disputes you may have with the borrower. So, but what does ADB do? Apart from setting up the rules, ADB reviews the borrower's procurement procedures, documents bid evaluations, award recommendations, and contracts, and ensures that procurement process is carried out in accordance with agreed procedures. And sometimes ADB may, when necessary, provide extended support to the borrowers. This is in particularly done in some economies with where the capacity might be an issue. For example, in Pacific, we have this extended support where we actually give support to the borrower in selecting the consultants for them. However, the borrowers then sign the contracts. So I already told you what we do and what the borrowers do. Now I will need to tell you what you should be doing. What you should be doing is you should be critically reviewing the bidding documentation to see if there is any ambiguity, omission, or internal contradiction, or there are any features or specifications or terms of reference or other conditions that you think are unclear, discriminatory, or restrictive. If this is the case, you need to seek clarification from the borrower in writing within the period specified in bidding documents. And from time to time, we see that the process actually gets changed as a result of such clarifications. So the specific bidding documents issued by the borrower govern each procurement transaction. And if bidder concludes that any of the provisions of the bidding documents are inconsistent with ADB regulations, it should raise this issue with the borrower. So, okay, we found out that you need to be critical. What else do you need to do? Apart from being critical, you actually need to be critical of yourself as well. So after you looked through the documents and found out that they are non-discriminatory and they're quite clear, and the open competition is practically guaranteed, what you need to do, you need to comply with critical requirements such as technical and commercial requirements of the bid. If you don't comply, your bid will be rejected. If you want to propose deviations to non-critical requirement or propose alternative solutions, you need to price a fully compliant bid and then separately indicate the adjustment. So information on bidding opportunities under open competitive bidding may be obtained from procurement plans that we publish on ADB website and specific procurement notices. So again, I'm going back to the ADB website and telling you where to find this. So if you type www.adb.org/projects, you actually are in this page where you can see all kinds of projects. On your left, you can choose the country, you can choose the sector, you can choose all kinds of things, and you can slice and dice the information and find what you're looking for. You can also look through procurement documents under the tab of documents, and you can also under the tab of tenders, you can look at current opportunities. The current opportunities are those for consultants, suppliers, and contractors. Okay, so if you're looking at where is the pie, what I might be interested in, where precisely are these contracts, we have launched last year something quite important and possibly for people who are into procurement quite sexy. It's called ProcDash. So it's Operational Procurement Statistics Dashboard. And it actually looks at operational procurement by region. It tells you where the contracts have been in specific years. Like, for example, I've chosen 2021 here for this presentation. And you can look at it from the position of investment support, policy-based support, and results-based lending. Okay, if you are a researcher, you can click on everything. But if you are actually a bidder, click only on investment support. Okay, so here you can see how much of operational procurement have been awarded, and you can see which countries actually have got the biggest slice of the pie. And it looks like in 2021, it was India. Okay, so now I will go to the policies applicable to recruitment of consultants and service providers. So again, as I have mentioned, in prior to 2017, we had a set of documents called Guidelines on Use of Consultants by Asian Development Bank and its borrowers. And post 2017, we moved to ADB procurement policy and regulations. So again, if you are a consultant, again, go back to the adb.org and find the information about ADB Consultant Management System. ADB Consultant Management System is a one-stop shop for you to find out opportunities. So if you're looking at the screen right now, you can see at home, consulting opportunities, shortlisted firms, awarded contracts, etc., all the way up to, for example, disbursements on our contracts. So if you have not yet registered, please do. So here you can search consulting opportunities, view shortlisted firms, and view awarded contracts. Why do you need to do this? So in consulting services recruitment notice, you can again slice and dice. In the middle, you can see something called search by expertise. So you can type your expertise, for example, procurement or energy or education, and you will see which projects specifically have this expertise. Why we started having this search by expertise is because of the nature of multi-sectoral projects, because we might have a project in transport which actually has an energy component, etc. So here we can also look at COVID-19 responses. And every time you are actually looking at consulting services recruitment notice, we publish as much information as possible for you to make an informed decision. So we have a CSRN profile, or consulting services recruitment notice profile. And here you can see whether it is possible that this particular assignment is reasonably small, but maybe it can be extended. Maybe it is possible to have the scope of this consulting recruitment extended later, etc., etc. So we disclose you the total budget. This budget actually includes the fees and also travel expenses and other expenses. We disclose the terms of reference and we disclose the cost estimates. Okay, so here we also publish the names of shortlisted firms. This can be for ongoing requests for proposals, those that didn't reach the deadline, and for all selections. If it is for ongoing ones, and in case if you want to jump on to the opportunities, maybe as an individual consultant or a small consulting firm, you want to start partnering with someone. So you might actually find companies with whom you can partner as a sub-consultants, for example. So we are publishing all this information. We are also publishing information on awarded contracts. And this gives you an opportunity to find out, okay, so we found out who was shortlisted, but who are actually getting contracts? Who are the successful firms with whom we might actually have some opportunities in the future? So talking about consultant management system, I am very, very proud. I actually was the person who designed a lot of specifications for the system. And I tried my best, but I am not working for Amazon.com. So it's not really that user-friendly. Okay, sometimes you need a bit of a push to actually figure out what it is, what we need to do. And for this, we created something called Consultant Tutor. So here we have quick reference guides for individual consultants and consulting firms, which actually gives you step-by-step procedures. How do you express interest? How do you submit claims? How do you prepare proposals, etc. So you can find the information on Consultants Tutor through our website as well. Starting from 2017, we also moved to the new approach to consulting services with fewer transactions requiring ADB prior review. We moved to the short advertising periods, which you may not like. However, the previous guidelines actually specified advertising periods for a paper-based procurement. And we have moved to electronic procurement, which allows us to move reasonably faster. So speaking of all of this, you probably are thinking that's a great opportunity. However, I need to tell you that about 18,000 consultants are actually registered in our consultant management system from around the world. And just by being proactive, meeting opportunities and matching them with your competencies and creating a fit for purpose and good proposals or good expression of interest, you may win the contracts. And I guess some of the speakers today will be talking about this as well. So we also moved to 90-10 ratio for quality and cost-based selection from 80-20. And we have relaxed eligibility and shortlisting requirements. for example, previously, if we were considering the firm, every person in the firm needed to be from ADB member country. Now we are looking at eligibility of the firm itself, but the consultants may actually be from other countries. So for further information, again, I cannot tell you enough. Go to adb.org. All the information is there. And please do follow us on LinkedIn, where we have several groups, including groups for consultants and groups for suppliers as well. The group for consultants is actually over 8,000 members already. So I'm also on LinkedIn. If you want to follow me, you are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Galia. And even with 4 minutes left, we are ahead of time. Very impressive, and thanks for a very concrete presentation. I think it's been very useful for all of our participants. Now we are moving into a case example from a Danish company who has been working with the ADB. And I am very happy to welcome Antti Inikian, who's the Director of Asia and Pacific with NIRAS. And also, please remember that you can ask questions in the chat also during this sessions, and then we will follow up after this presentation with a Q&A session with all of our speakers. Thank you, and the floors are yours, Antti.
Thank you very much, Clara, for that introduction. Yes, representatives from the Danish government, as well as the Asian Development Bank and the company participants. It's it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to represent and introduce NIRAS a bit. My name is Antti Inikian, and I'm the Managing Director of NIRAS here in the Philippines, and as well as the Regional Director for Asia Pacific region. I've been given 10 minutes, Clara, and I'll try to stick to that. And it's a big topic, but I'll just try to briefly go through, just say 2 words about the company. And then I was asked to highlight a couple of case projects that we have in these sectors. Circular economy, unfortunately, not one of those yet. We hope to be working in that field, but something in water and energy. And then going a little bit to the other side, let's say, of the defense to what we just heard by Mrs. Markova just now. So some of the participants may know NIRAS already. Danish consulting and engineering firm. You can see my screen, yes?
We can see your screen, yes.
Good. So yes, so some of you may know NIRAS already, established back in 1956, currently houses close to 2,500 staff across some 30 countries. Headquarters remains in Allerød in Denmark, and last year we turned over some 2.5 billion Danish kroner, some 340 million euros. Where global local footprint is a big thing for us. So over the years, we'll be establishing long-term presence in many countries, including several offices here in Asia, as well as the Philippines. We have the group consists of several different business areas, some of which work more internationally than others. The international consulting there, this is something of an illustration of the main areas of work. You see international consulting there at the left side of the screen. That is the department specializing in developing and emerging countries. And this is obviously this is where we work the most with the clients like the ADB. But we bring in, like, say, the sectors like we're discussing today: renewable energy, water, both of which are very key areas of competence for us, as well as circular economy. We bring in then people from the different areas as they may be needed. So we have the right people working on the right, doing the right things at the right time. We tend to say, and this was just an example of like a typical bid that we might and project that we might to engage several units for. We registered in the Philippines 4 years ago, and the idea is, and we're still in the process of building the Philippines into something of a hub in Asia. And one key driver of this was, of course, also to really set up an office that is specialized in the ADB services or services delivery, and really a deeper knowledge of the ADB, and really try to concentrate here. I've been here myself since 2019. We now the office here has been able to secure some 7 ADB contracts since, and we're a little bit held back by COVID, but now currently some 20 permanent staff here in the Philippines, and then growing, and then have many more project staff around the region. So some words on sustainable energy and water, both of which we work with the ADB. So this is something we go back decades into this, and renewable energy efficiency, and overall this green transition or greenzition. We have great ambitions in that. We currently already house some 400 staff that are specialized in renewable energy and environmental services across the company. In the developing country context, we particularly specialize in maybe policy advisory, regulatory services, and especially developing and facilitating more enabling environments for investments and increased investments, including from the private sector into renewable energy. And here is one example of that is the work that we're doing with the ADB in Indonesia, which is precisely this. We are working across with the different key stakeholders in the energy sector there to create a more enabling environment. And in water, yes, all facets of water, definitely water supply and sanitation, but really everything related to the water resources, the infrastructure management, urban, rural, utility services, etc. Have also more than 250 in-house specialists in this field. And right now, I just picked a couple of projects that we're doing, and these are what were mentioned earlier, these TRTA contracts that are project development and design, or project development assignments. One in the Philippines, that's in irrigation infrastructure modernization and improvement in the Mindanao region. And another one is in Vietnam, that has to do with flood risk infrastructure. So to highlight a couple of those. Sorry, I'm really trying to keeping time, Clara.
Yeah, so I can give you 2 more minutes if that can be useful, so I don't have to rush too much.
Always, thanks. So a couple of then really, and to exactly focus on sort of us and the ADB, and us working with the ADB, and why we continue working with the ADB. We're an established service provider, and really at the top of the Nordic service providers between Denmark, the Danish, Finnish, and Swedish offices in particular over the past years. The last 10 years, I put some figures. We've won 34 contracts worth some 26 million euros in fees in total, and we're quite happy with what we call a hit ratio or win ratio of 38%. So of course we lose a lot, but we've been winning quite well, and we have a number of ongoing projects and assignments now in a variety of countries, of different types of contracts, and very much in the green and blue sectors, but also then in sort of the social development, human development sectors, in education, gender, social inclusion, etc. And it's been very much a Nordic. So we have offices in many countries, but it's really been the Nordic offices leading the way with the ADB traditionally with Denmark, between Denmark, Finland, and Sweden. And then now they're still very much in the game, but then the Manila office has been established then to really specialize further in this. So we're really always tapping into the expertise that we have in different parts of the company. And we were happy just to recently inform that the nearest Manila office is the #3 service provider in the Philippines to the ADB over the last 5 years, which was nice. We've been in existence for much less than that. But why the ADB? I think we've heard some good points already. One is that how we see the ADB as a reliable long-term partner whose commitment to its member states, member countries is really beyond doubt. So it's a very stable partner working in those countries. Aside from that, what is important in the practical operational side is really this transparency in the procurement, in the different phases of the planning and investment planning and procurement planning. As Ms. Gallia said earlier, I think that really there is a lot of information available on the website. And once you learned how to read it a little bit, you understand a little bit where the ADB ship is going in different geographies and sectors. So you can also, that helps us as service providers then to get ready and try to prepare. And then the procurement process is very clear, especially with the ADB, particularly administering the contract. So there's some differences, but there are not very many different procurement processes. And you know what's expected, you know how, and you also know how long it's going to take roughly. So you know when a request for an expression of interest comes out, you know roughly when you're going to be implementing. Just to highlight maybe just that this difference that's not always clear is that there is quite a big difference between indeed contracts administered by the ADB and then contracts administered by the recipient or the partner countries, the member countries who are the loan recipients. So that's when you work directly with those governments. They take care of the procurement as well as then the actual project implementation. So there you're not talking about just one client, even though they do have to follow ADB rules, but you are talking a multitude of clients in dozens of countries and of course many government agencies and so on. So those contracts can be bigger and more interesting in some ways, but they're also riskier. So we take that also into account in our decisions to go. Winning projects with the ADB, like I said, we've done relatively well in the past and continue to be so. We're even now negotiating a contract for one project. It's no secrets. You have to understand the project very well and understand what it has to deliver, and the context within where it comes from, the backgrounds. And then you have to make sure that your references, your competencies as a company or as a consortium meet the requirements and that you're able to deliver. The technical capacities and management capacities are critical, and those have to be extremely well written, because ADB rarely interviews, if ever, and it's all done on paper. So the approaches, the profiles, the CVs, the corporate presentations need to be done extremely well and with a lot of care, so that the selectors understand exactly what you're doing. So there's no, that's that. And the competitive pricing, I felt to say one thing was it was a big improvement for us, this new policy and the focus on quality, and this QCBS 9010 makes life a lot easier, so you can actually invest in the quality rather than being afraid that you're going to be priced out of the market. So that's been a big plus. So just to recognize that. But budgets are still quite tight often. But then procurement procedure important to understand, and then indeed this consultant management system, as was mentioned before, can be a bit tricky if you don't know what you're doing, and typically it takes a couple of days to upload a full technical proposal, for instance. So you need to set time aside for that. And then in addition to having it all nicely on paper, obviously you need to be very confident that you can deliver. So the projects take time and attention. The ADB is a very hands-on type of client, and there's a lot of interaction, a lot of communication with them. And that's both from the administrative management perspective as well, of course, from the technical perspective. So there needs to be a very clear, of course, a top-notch technical team, but then also a project management setup and a backstopping setup that allows this interaction to happen on a very consistent basis. And there is you need to also understanding the procedures is important, because IDB is a bit bureaucratic. So the administrative side needs to be properly resourced, and you need to be sort of know where to go, to know how to navigate that, to make sure that you can implement the project in time. To wrap up, really the one critical thing is, of course, it's really to understand the scope of the services that's required. It's a very competitive market as well. It is very typical to form partnerships, either in forms of joint venture or consortia. Sub-consultants were mentioned as well. This is a very important part of it. So because the scopes are often quite broad and have to touch on many different technical aspects, as well as geographical knowledge. So I was happy to be able to have been invited here, because we are always looking for partners near us, and we offer a lot of technical expertise, presence in the countries, good track record with the ADB, knowledge of these procedures, both in the procurement and the management side, implementation side, and indeed some size as well, to also manage with the financial aspects of it, for instance, and the management and backstopping. So we're going to be here for years to come, and committed to the ADB and the developing Asia, and I'm very happy. I am, and we are, the whole team, to discuss with you on possible partnerships for future opportunities. So please do not hesitate to get in touch via LinkedIn or email or otherwise. Thank you very much, also for the 2 minutes of extra time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Inkinen, and right on time with the 2 extra minutes. Very impressive. Now we will move into the Q&A sessions, and questions are already ticking in the chat, but please continue to ask, and I'll try to manage time, so we will have time for all of the questions. The first question is for Mr. David Mugado, and it's asked by Saki Suyari from Neras. And the question is, I am wondering, for the private operations funding, do you have the scheme or the document for us to request the funding for in renewable energy sector? So there's a request for scheme or document, David.
So if I understand correctly, they're looking for project. Is that correct? So basically, if I understood correctly the question, so we, from the department I have, we do some pilot projects. So if with innovative technologies, we have access to funds, and we occasionally do a call for projects, pilot projects, once in a while. But then if we're talking more about operations, so like a big renewable energy project, solar project, wind project in a country, then maybe that country would have an auction, and the winning bidder would then seek, or already in the process be seeking for financing. And this is where our private sector operations can come in and finance the project. There are some cases where there's agreements with the government directly. Those projects have to be looked at more carefully, because then they will have to satisfy Gali in procurement aspects and comply with those. So that's very, very important. So this is some ways that we can look at collaborating, whether they're looking to projects in a country and looking for financing, and that's where ADB can come in, or if they've got innovative technologies. Again, if we are doing calls for pilot projects, innovative technologies, then there might be opportunities there. But typically those would be very small projects, maybe around $200,000 to $500,000, so not very, very large. I hope I managed to answer the question, Clara. Thank you.
I think you did. Otherwise, I see that the person asking, 1 second, I'm just checking.
Maybe
here,
Galia, you wanted to add
Galia,
something?
you're trying to elaborate on as well, right?
Yeah, maybe Galia can help me.
I give the floor to you.
Okay. Thank you, David, and thank you, Clara. I think that the question was actually how can a Danish company operating in the energy sphere get a financing from ADB? So for a specific project. And for this, this is not a scope of this seminar. However, I did provide it in the chat, the link to our private sector operations department. So altogether, ADB private sector operations operate in a similar manner to IFC, of World Bank Group. So we would not finance more than 25% of the project size, and it needs to be in developing member country, and it needs to be in line with ADB strategic objectives. So because we are not actually in the same scope, I would suggest that you do check ADB website for this specific information, if I understood your questions correctly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David, please hang on, because I have another question for you from Nikolai Chevo from NTU International. With regards to ADB focus on energy efficiency and the current price hike in the sector, would the bank be considering any EE in building programs in Central Asia?
So definitely, it's an area where we're looking a lot at energy efficiency, particularly with the retrofit of buildings, so to reduce the heating losses, particularly in the winter. So that's one area we're looking at in the building sector. Of course, also looking at use of efficient technologies. And so how can we deploy more efficient boilers, maybe heat pump technology, also district heating systems, how can we upgrade those, make them more efficient? So there's a lot of, in the energy efficiency we can do, of course, more on the supply side in terms of the power generation. So if we're talking again about Central Asia, then heating is quite important. So what can we do in terms of the natural gas combined heat and power unit? And improving efficiency there. Can we replace the system itself? Is there some specific technological aspects we can work on? Then, of course, on the transportation of that heat, so the pipelines, the heating pipelines, let's say, and trying to make them more efficient, improve the insulation, look at heat exchanger technology, and so on. And then finally, of course, in the building itself, as I mentioned. So that, but we also do energy efficiency in public buildings and private sector buildings. We've got a couple of projects where we're looking at working with financial intermediaries where they could on lend to energy efficiency projects. So these are local banks in several of the countries in Central Asia where they could lend to for individual residential consumers or commercial buildings to upgrade their buildings. That's sort of a range of things we do. There's probably a couple more, but I'm glad to follow up and explore that further.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. The next question is also for you, and it's from Rambo. Does ADB have upcoming funding plan for biomass and waste to energy projects in SEA? And if you're not able to answer right now, I'm sure we can follow up on email as well.
Yeah, I think we do. We've got some opportunities. It's an area where I think ADB hasn't done much. We have engaged, particularly on the private sector, on waste to energy. So many opportunities we've been exploring. Under the new ADB energy policy, there's some conditions that need to be met, and which waste to energy has to be seen as a part of the holistic waste management process. So of course, you've got landfills, recycling, composting maybe, and then waste to energy. So that would be a sort of at the end of the waste hierarchy, let's say, and the prudent order of waste management. But it's an area where we can explore, and there's certain colleagues that have been working on several waste-to-energy projects in Southeast Asia and even South Asia as well. So we could connect you with them if there's any opportunities.
Thank you very much, David. We have several questions coming up in the chat. And we have a question from Rudiga Manko from Ramble, and as there's questions for both Christian and Mrs. Ismakova, I will just divide it into two. Christian, are you still here?
Yes.
Just checking, you are still here, perfect. There's a question for you here. Can we find on the ADB website, apart from the CPS documents, or can you share estimates on budgets and pipeline you envisage in the water sector for next years?
I think I try to start talking about this, but really handing over then to Galia, because I guess, you know, she is much more experienced in that one. Very quickly, obviously, ADB is following a very strict project processing cycle, starting with the country programming and starting with the country operations business plan that outlines activities basically in all our developing member countries. And all those documents are publicly available. So there is an opportunity to check those documents and see what will be the upcoming pipeline in a respective country. And obviously, once projects are indicated there, if the government approves at some point, it will pop up as a consultancy, right? So I think it's important generally to understand the ADB project processing cycle, starting from the early programming, country programming, to the implementation and to the monitoring and evaluation. And there is lots of information that is available on ADB website. Galia, over to you.
Thank you. What I would suggest is to actually try to check ProgDash. So I'll try to share the screen and try to navigate. So, okay, can you see my screen?
We can see your screen, yes.
Yeah, okay. So what I understood we're looking for a specific sector, and we're looking at water supply sector, correct? Okay. Just because it's easier for me to do differently here on my computer, because I have multiple screens. Can I just check on energy so that you will see? Okay, so if I just click on sector energy, and if I, for example, go into borrowing country, and for example, I will say, okay, let's look at India. Okay, so I come to a specific information, what we have in operational nature for this sector in a specific country. So what I suggest you do if you're looking for opportunities going forward, you look at procurement statistics dashboards. And also, if you are looking at ADB website, so as I have suggested, you go to projects here. Okay, somehow it wants to go to my project, which you may not be interested in. Okay, so if we go to projects, here we can actually filter it per specific sector. Let's again try energy, and let's try type, for example, sovereign. And let's try the status, which is proposed, which is unapproved, and apply the filter. And then you will see the results, currently 34 results in energy, sovereign, proposed, and approved. And if you want to look at tenders, you go here and you again applies the same kind of filters, and you will see the information. Proactively, you can also look at procurement plans, and procurement plans will show the planned procurement. I think that's roughly my marketing of ADB website.
Yeah, and we will also send out all the slides, so you'll have all the information there. Mrs. Galia, the next question is also for you, and as we have a lot of questions and time is very short, I'll please ask all of you to keep your answers quite short. But it's also from Rudika from Rheinbøl asking, is it correct that a Danish company can propose experts that are not from a DMC or MC? Is there any particular reasons why? This is correct. That was a very short answer. Thank you very much. And is there any particular reasons why the ADB does not provide consultants with a client certificate upon the completion of a project? Thank you very much.
I do not know why we do not provide the certificates, but possibly because it will require us to provide, I don't know, thousands of certificates. So we give contracts to over 3,000 individual consultants per year, and we cannot automate the certificates of completion because we actually need to figure out what it is that they have completed. Instead, what we refer to is the contracts that can be shared with other institution, or the payment slips that you have been paid in full, for example.
Okay, thank you very much. Then Lars Benson from NTU would like to ask a question in person. Lars, I will give the word to you, but please promise me to keep it super short.
I'll be very fast. Yes.
Thank you.
So my name is Lars Benson from NTU International. I have just a question and an appreciation also, because what you mentioned earlier, and I'm addressing this to David, about policy, regulatory, institutional framework, capacity building also. You had this indicative clean energy project list. Have you thought about getting some support in this also by consultancies in this with policy, regulatory framework, institutional framework setup, capacity building? Because this is often what actually goes to the lack of this is often one of the reasons for failure in these projects also. Have you any thoughts on this?
Thank you, Lars. That's a great question. So the ADB provides a set of sort of support to countries. So that can be in terms of technical assistance, and basically we come to the country, we help the government to set up the project in the first stage. We also look at them, maybe helping them with capacity building, training, and could have aspects in terms of policy related aspects. And so that's one area we help. We also have policy-based loans, so we can give a loan to the government to help with a certain aspect. So that could be on green hydrogen, it could be on heating tariffs, it could be energy sector reform. So that's an area where we do a lot of work. Of course, this is very important so that then when we do the projects, they are financially viable. And so in those cases, of course, we will look for consultants, consultancy firms to help us implement those projects. So it's again a question of keeping an eye on ADB's websites, because there'll be a call either for individual consultants or for firms to help in these different countries on a range. It can be a wide range of aspects. It could be even for a hydropower project to help with design aspects, or to even to look at monitoring and verification of projects. It could be, again, as I mentioned, training and capacity building of government, looking at what kind of policies need to change, how the tariffs would need to change, etc. So there is a wide range in the energy sector of what can be done. We are now looking very much at experts to help us understand these new technologies that are upcoming as well. So whether it's fuel cell technology, green hydrogen, we're starting to interact with governments to undertake sort of pre-feasibility studies. So we are learning, the government is learning all in the process, and that's where we need a lot of expertise as well. So maybe these are just some examples of.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lars.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Lars. We have 3 questions left and 4 minutes if I keep the closing remarks very short. So there will be some quick questions and hopefully also some quick answers. I guess this question is also for you, David. It's from Leif Christensen from Dolle. He is writing, I have a project for passive powered air conditioning units with no need for a connection to grid. Patent is in place, but need funding and financing to take this to market. Is ADB ready to enter such a project at a very early stage? It has a huge potential. That's what he writes. It's a big question for a short answer.
Yeah, very quickly. So it was the example I was mentioning. We fortunately, as part of the energy policy, but also we have these technical assistance and funds dedicated to innovative technologies and trying to bring them to Asia Pacific. So recently we did a call for innovative technologies and for pilot projects, and one covered air conditioning and looking at innovative filtering and smart technologies as well. So trying to combine all in one, very relevant now for COVID-19, of how we can reduce sort of virus and other diseases. So that was one. We looked at pilot projects looking at solar battery and micro hydro in Philippines, looking at heat exchanger technologies for wastewater in industrial processes. So we do support those, but it's only occasionally in terms of the piloting size. Then when we're interacting more with government, typically sort of go for larger scale projects. So that's maybe when the technology is a bit more mature. So those are the 2 sides of support that I can give very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Then one quick question for Mrs. Scalia from Hillary from Ramble, asking, is it correct now that non-ADB member country residents, e.g. Greece, can be included in our tender teams as key expert, or is this something that is still in the process of getting in place?
Yes, you can include non-ADB member countries experts as key experts in proposals under new procurement policy. However, you cannot include them if the project is still using the old policy, which is the guidelines for use of consultants by ADB and the borrowers. And it also applies to RFPs that were issued previously, which did not have this flexibility, like for replacement experts. But I already see quite a lot of experts being selected for projects in Central Asia that are coming from Lithuania, from Ukraine, and other countries, but in the proposals of the firms from ADB member countries.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We have one more question left, but we are simply out of time, and I promise that we will end on time. So there was a question for NIRAS asking if there were any specific technologies that NIRAS is looking for in the near future for the ADB projects. And the person who have been asking this, unfortunately, I cannot see this in the chat, but I will encourage you to reach out to NIRAS on email. You got the information already, and hopefully you can take that discussions among both of you. There will be no time for concluding remarks. I think we had to prioritize the questions. So I will just say a big thank you to all of us, telling you that the presentations will be shared and uploaded to the ADB development page, webpage. But first, you have to answer a post-event survey, and it's really important that you answer the survey, so please do so. Otherwise, just thank you for a very good seminar. I think it's been really interesting, some good questions, some really good interactions. Have a wonderful day. Thank you and bye.
Thank you, Clara.
Thank you very much, Clara.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.